Well, hello, everybody. This is Tim Green with Rattle Magazine. Welcome to Rattlecast number 249. Thanks so much for joining me. Today's guest is Annie Finch. She'll be here in about 5 or 10 minutes. But before we begin, I should say that Rattle is a publication of the Rattle Foundation, a 501c3 nonprofit working to promote the practice of poetry. We've been in continuous publication since 1995 and are unaffiliated with any other organization. We just do all this because we love poetry. And I know you do too, so please do click on the like button and share. Make sure you're subscribed, all that good stuff to help spread poetry around the internet. It really does help if you click the like button and you leave reviews on iTunes and Spotify and all that good stuff, where our lives are governed by algorithms. And if you click stuff and leave reviews and leave ratings and things like that, it's more likely that more people are going to find this great content, and then we're going to spread poetry around and make the world a better place, and there'll be world peace and everybody will love each other and all that good stuff. So make sure you do that. That's your little part in the pantomime. Now, we are going to go to our Poet Respond poet, as we always do, and Terry Kirby Erickson is here, and
Hey
she
there,
has a poem for
Tim.
Father's Day. Hey, Terry, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm great. It's great to have you in Rattle, first of all, for the first time, and great to have a Poet Respond poem. It's always nice to have those Father's Day type poems because people love to share them, and this is a really touching one that you wrote. Can you tell us a little bit about your father and what compelled you to write the poem?
Well, both of my parents passed away in 2019, so I really miss them. I miss my father every day. And of course, when these days come along, like Father's Day and birthdays and that kind of thing, it brings the memories up to the surface for sure. And when I started this poem, I was thinking about the image of him uh, getting pennies for change and tossing them on the sidewalk, which he used to always do. And in fact, after he passed away, one of his golfing buddies wrote me a letter and said, one of the things we all remember is how Tom would take the pennies out of his pocket and throw them on the sidewalk. And we, would tell him, you need to donate those. And he's like, I'm donating them to nature. And so I started out with that. And also, my dad was a great whistler. He whistled these happy tunes, and he would always whistle for my brother and me when we were out playing in the summertime or whatever. So when it was time for dinner, he would give this shrill whistle that sounded like nothing else. So we knew we better start running toward the house wherever we were. And you could probably hear that whistle on Mars, to tell you the truth. So
Yeah, that's funny.
those
I
are
mean,
the
I had
images
my
as
yeah, my dad had that whistle too, the same exact dinner time call, and I wrote a poem for that for our or for our prompt poems later a few years ago. I'm trying to
Oh
figure
yeah.
out because I could never. I've like read instructions about how to do that. It's like some magical property that people who grew up in that era have. So
That's that's right. My husband's father had a bell that he would ring, but there was something about that whistle. And I could never whistle. I'd try to do the pucker and the blowing, and it just never came out the same.
yeah, yeah. Well, it's such a touching poem because of those details, and getting to hear a really concise and intimate character sketch is something that, we always love to read and hear. Why don't you go ahead and read this poem? It's My Father.
Sure. My father. My father was a whistler and a penny lobber. He had no use for the lowest denomination of hard money, so handing pennies to him for change was followed by a quick coin toss to the sidewalk. Dad's 1 cent pieces are all over this town, including the pockets and piggy banks of strangers, something he never met. He could talk to anybody, and they talked to him. While paying for paint or car parts or anything at all, cashiers would tell my dad the stories of their lives, and he would listen. Once, my ex-husband, who my father later referred to as a bad penny, was yelling at me because supper wasn't hot on the table when he came home from work. He didn't know that Dad was upstairs until he came bounding down saying, Boy, if you're so hungry, why don't you eat a goddamn cracker? Which was one of the most satisfying moments of my entire life and still worth a whistle.
Yeah, that was Terry Kirby Erickson with My Father. And I love that detail so much. He could talk to anybody and they talk to him. I mean, that's such a great skill to have and to pass around town like pennies. Really, really lovely tribute. Thanks so much for sharing that, Terry.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, definitely my pleasure. Have a great night.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye. That was Terry Kirby Erickson with My Father. Today's poem on Poets Respond. As always, if you'd like to submit poems about current events, it doesn't have to be like a holiday going on. It can be anything in the news, political things, whatever you'd like. Just go to rattle.com/respond, and you can find where to submit those. Now, we're going to take a break and go to our main guest, Annie Finch, so sit tight, and I'll be right back with more poetry. And we're back. Thanks for your patience. Like I said, today's guest is Annie Finch. Annie is an American poet, writer, translator, speaker, teacher, and performer. She's the author of 6 books of poetry, most recently Spells, New and Selected Poems. Her other works include essays, books, and anthologies on poetics, feminism, and women's earth-based spirituality, including the influential book Measure for Measure, an anthology of poetic meters. Educated at Yale and Stanford, where she earned her Ph.D., she's lectured at Berkeley, Harvard, and Oxford, and performed her poetry across the U.S. and in India, Mexico, Africa, and throughout Europe. She was the interviewee in issue number 82 of Rattle, where we talked a lot about meter and witchery and all sorts of fun stuff. It was a really wonderful interview. We want to dig a little deeper in now with this and share some poems too, which is the fun part of having her on the podcast. For more on Annie, visit her website, anniefinch.com. Anniefinch.com, just like it's spelled. And here she is, Annie Finch. Hey, Annie, it's great to see you again.
Hey, it's great to be here. I'm excited to continue our conversation.
Yeah, definitely. We had such a fun conversation because I love the way that poetry is a kind of spell. Like that, it's like when people ask me what poetry is that don't read poetry at all, that's what I tell them. It's like a magic spell that actually works. And we don't know what way it works and the esoteric ways that it might actually be working on the universe, but it works in our brain, at least psychologically and emotionally. And so that's what poetry is a magic spell. And I love talking about all this stuff with you. And I love meter too. And we're going to dig a little bit deeper into that. But you just mentioned you had a poem for Father's Day that you'd like to start out with. Yeah, why don't you read that to kick the show off?
Okay. This is my elegy from my father. Henry Leroy Finch, August 8th, 1918 to August 22nd, 1997. It starts with 2 epigraphs. Hart Crane, bequeath us to no earthly shore until is answered in the vortex of our grave, the seal's wide spindrift gaze towards paradise. And if a lion could talk, we couldn't understand it. From Wittgenstein, because my dad was a Leo. Elegy for my father. Under the ocean that stretches out wordlessly past the long edge of the last human shore, there are deep windows the waves have not opened, where night is reflected through decades of glass. There is the nursery, there is the nanny, there are my father's unreachable eyes turned towards the window. Is the child uneasy? His is the death that is circling the stars. In the deep room where candles burn soundlessly and peace pours at last through the cells of our bodies, three of us are watching. One of us is staring with the wide gaze of a wild, wave-fed seal. Incense and sage speak in smoke loud as waves, and crickets sing sand towards the edge of the hourglass. We wait outside time while night collects courage around us. His vigil is wordless, and you watch the longest, move the farthest, besieged by your breath pulling into your body. You stare towards your death, head arched on the pillow, your left fingers curled, your mouth sucking gently, unmoved by these hours and their vigil of salt spray. You show us how far you are going and how long the long minutes are, while spiraling night watches over the room and takes you until you watch us in turn. Lions speak their own language. You are still breathing. Here is release. Here is your pillow, cool like a handkerchief pressed in a pocket. Here is your white tousled long growing hair. Here is a kiss on your temple to hold you safe through your solitude's long, steady war. Here you can go. We will stay with you, keeping the silence we all came here for. Night take his left hand, turning the pages, spin with the windows and doors that he mended, spin with his answers, patient, impatient, spin with his dry independence, his arms warmed by the needs of his family, his hands flying under the wide carved gold ring, and the pages flying so his thoughts could fly. His breath slows, lending its edges out to the night. Here is his open mouth. Silence is here, like one more new question that he will not answer. A leaf is his temple, the dark is the prayer. He has given his body. His hand lies above the sheets in a symbol of wholeness, a curve of thumb and forefinger ringed with wide gold. And the instant that empties his breath is a flame, faced with a sudden cathedral's new stone.
Yeah, beautiful poem. And you can feel the music in all of those lines coming through the music of speech, which is what poetry is, in addition to spells. Those are the two things I always say. Poetry is the music of speech, and poetry is a magic spell. Both of those are very prevalent in that poem, Elegy for My Father by Annie Finch. And Annie, I wanted to talk sort of a little bit more in depth and sort of grounded about meter itself, because we had a meter prompt a few weeks ago where we asked people to write in meter, and there was more sort of consternation and stress about it than I imagined. And the idea of even what meter is seems a little bit foreign to a lot of poets. I mean, we've got a lot of submissions, and people said frequently that it was one of the most difficult prompts we've had was just to write in meter. So just from a very basic level to start out, what is meter, and what are we even talking about when we're talking about meter?
I love that. Well, meter comes from a word that means measure, so it's a kind of a measuring, but it also comes from a deeper, older word that's connected to matrix and mother and mighty and power. So it's kind of to me, it's the magical measuring of our energetic, or of our speech, of our thought, of just, it's kind of like a vibe, sort of. It's like the vibe of language, to me. But technically, it's depending on the language. There's always a meter. If you go back far enough before writing and before books, you come to the oral tradition, and there's always a meter, and the meter usually takes the key parts of the language that have meaning, and it creates patterns out of them. So it's patterns made out of the natural way that we speak. It's just turning them into something more more powerful, more aware, more focused, more intentional.
Yeah, and this in
More
the center,
exciting.
in the center of meter, like the most important part of it, you could say, is the beat or the stress or the wand, as you call it, which is an interesting way to think about it too. And so, what is that? I think hearing beats. If you're somebody who writes and reads and thinks and scans poems, and thinks about meter, it's sort of obvious what the stress and the beat is. But what is a stress or a beat or the wand? And why
Yeah,
is that what we count? Or how is that
yeah,
what we count? I guess I should say.
yeah. Well, why matters too, and why it goes back to what I said before, because in English, it's a really key part of how our language works. That's why we count it as meter. Like meter's never an accident. Like whatever the meter's based on is based on how the language means. So like in Chinese, the meters have tone in them because tone carries meaning in Chinese. So in English, meters are based on accent fundamentally because accent is the main way we carry meter. I mean, the way we carry meaning. So it's like, I always like to work with people's names when we start doing meter, like if your name is pronounced wrong. Like if I said Timothy instead of Timothy, then we know it's wrong. Then you'll hear it. So we can all hear it all the time. We use accent all the time um, to stress a certain syllable. And it's basically a combination of and loud is big deal, length, and also pitch, the higher pitch. So any combination of those three things, louder, longer, higher pitch, any of that could create the emphasis, which we use to measure.
Yeah, and then that
So
emphasis like helps us sort of it creates a contrast kind of as we're speaking. So it's not this like monotone. It's easier to follow like the rhythm and the music and the repetition are all things that sort of keep us engaged with the actual thoughts. So if you see somebody like the stereotypical like high school science teacher talking about like the periodic table and like argon is this, and you don't really hear any meter, but in poetry you hear the meter a lot more strongly in it, and it's what pulls you into following language and sort of feeling it in a bodily way, is what I think
yeah,
of too. It's like even as you're saying lines in a poem, there's sort of a little like a head bob, a little movement, a little kind of swing, a little kind of dance, and it's the beat of that word that you're accentuating, that you're saying a little more loudly, with a little more emphasis, a little more higher pitch, like you said.
yeah,
And so there's this whole like rhythm that exists completely like under the surface of the way we speak just naturally. And then what
yeah.
poets have always done is find regularity in that and make things that maximize the music of the way we speak. And that's really what poetry is, or at least has been for the longest time, until we sort of drifted into free verse.
Yeah, well, it's the thing that's really unique to poetry is that there's a pattern and a structure made out of it, right? Like, as long as when you, that's what I consider it like the heart of poetry. It's so true, and I love the way there's different kinds of ways that we use stress. Like there's the dictionary stress, like when you say a dictionary, it's supposed to be on the first syllable in the dictionary. But then, like before, when you said we find the pattern in that, like you stressed in, it didn't have to be stressed, but that's a performative stress.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the most exciting things about writing poetry in meter is that you can control where people are going to put the performative stresses. Like you can say, we find the meter in that. You can actually make people stress the in, even if you're not in the room, which I
Mm-hmm.
think is just the coolest thing.
Yeah.
And
Mm-hmm.
it's such a mystery, such an amazing, wordless, meaningless, like a meaningless, meaningful mystery.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so a poem with a regular meter has that a certain number of beats per line, and that's what makes it regular. It doesn't have like 3 and then 2 and then 5. That would be free verse, you know.
Yeah, when you unless you made a pattern out of it, like you can make a pattern out of three,
Mm-hmm.
4, 5.
Yeah,
But the key is that it's predictable.
yeah. Oh,
And
that's
I
a good
think in
point.
our
Yeah.
culture right
Mm-hmm.
now, people are kind of suspicious of predictable because I think there's a misunderstanding of what modernism was. And like modernism was about being liberated and somehow more aware, more enlightened, and that had to be random and unpredictable. Like that's better somehow. It's almost a kind of puritanical thing. But I think, personally, I love when things are predictable because I'm so wild and crazy all the time. Like I love things being predictable. They're so beautiful that way. And I think a lot of humans are like that.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
and there's this tension always between the predictability and then the variation on the predictability. So you're setting up this expectation, and then there's so much like pleasure in the like slight breaking of the expectation, the way the poem moves around, through the meter, and the slight variations on the meter become a really beautiful thing because of that interplay between the two.
exactly. Yeah, yeah. Like I was just like the poem I just read about my father, the elegy. I wrote it right after he died, and I chose the meter dactylic because I wanted something really epic and powerful. And it was also very soothing. And I now think of this as the meter of the heart, like it was a meter of coming to terms with the emotions. But like in this rhythm, bump up, bump, bump up, like here is your white tousled long growing hair. Here is a kiss on your temple to hold you. Like every time I read that, because it has that rhythm, bump up, bump, bump up, bump, bump up, bump, bump, it makes me stress that first here. Here is a kiss on your temple to hold you. It's not saying here is a kiss. It's saying here is a kiss. Like I'm actually kissing my father whenever I read that line because the dactylic meter allows me, invites me, almost makes me. I don't know. It's such a mysterious relationship, but somehow the meter brings that kiss forth with that syllable here, and it's just so incredible.
Yeah. Do you want to read
Yeah.
another poem? I think it'd be nice to read "My Baby Fell Apart," which is iambic meter. It's
Yeah.
just as we talked about in the interview, the most common, and one of the main things that you talk about is that it shouldn't be the most common. We should use all the meters, but
Yeah.
it is a great meter too. And so let's hear this first, then we can break off and talk about the differences. And you were kind enough to include scansions, which is where show through some images or symbols what the meter is, so you can go along with it. And before I guess you do read this poem, so people know what they're looking at as you read the first couple lines that are scanned, why the wand and the cup? You have the wand, which you use as a slash for the stress, and you have the cup, which you use the U for the unstressed. So why the wand and the cup? Is that more clear for a reason, you think, or it is confusing? You
Why
have
I
that,
use those words?
yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I've been teaching this stuff for so long. Every time I teach any kind of poetry, if the people don't already know it, then I usually kind of end up doing it. I can't help it, and they always want it, and I always want to, you know, share it because I think it's the most important thing that isn't normally taught, right? So I taught it so much, and there really aren't officially the right words for it. Like the words are like stress and unstress, which is so exhausting to say all the time. Unstressed syllable. That's 5 syllables. And if you're saying it 100 times in a class, where's the unstressed syllable? It's just exhausting. So cup was the first one, like because I was a pagan and I love tarot, and you have the wands and the cups, and so I just started using cups because it looks just like a cup, the little U. And then it was such a success and it made everything so much easier that then the wands followed. And then the third one is the line in between that separates the repeating pattern. And I'm really proud of that one. That took me like 20 years of teaching to figure out. I wanted something concrete, you know, easy to remember, concrete, fun, one syllable, just that people couldn't get confused by.
Mm-hmm.
And so wands and cups were like that, and then I came up with edge for the foot boundary, which
Mm-hmm.
was really.
Yeah, and it makes it really clear. Yeah, that the music involved. It's like a measure in a song. Like if you play guitar, there's like riffs that you repeat, and every time you repeat it, and you're maybe playing variations on that, but it's like a certain number of chords and the way they get together. And in the same way with this, there's the feet, which are the little units which you break out like this, and each one has a wand because that's kind of what makes it. That makes it a whole unit, the beat. And so it's similar to saying something is like 4/4 time or something when you talk about different meters. So you can think of it
Yeah.
that way, but it's a way to show the music of poetry. And I love the wand. What I always think of, since I heard this, I never heard it before you, but I think of
I
like
made
that,
it up. I
like a
invented it.
teacher like pointing and sort of like, like do like pointing to what is sort of emphasized as
Yeah,
their, or
yeah,
like a conductor maybe with one of
yeah,
those things. And imagine that
yeah,
wand there, as they like conduct the orchestra. And
totally.
so you can imagine it that way. But let's hear My Baby Fell Apart, which is the iambic, which perhaps sadly is the by far most common meter that's written
Yeah,
in English lately.
by far.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. My baby fell apart, and I could see. It was a simple vision of surrender. There was no baby left inside of me. I'd learned a way to be, but suddenly the baby bent a way I could not bend her. My baby fell apart, and I could see her falling through a loud internal sea, away from the one place that still kept tender. There was no baby left inside of me. I fell apart. I couldn't even be there for the loss. I lost my need to mend her. My baby fell apart, and I could see something of her who fell away from me, but nothing to make me ever need to tend her. There was no baby left inside of me. I had no baby. I could not but see the need to be apart from her, to end her. My baby fell apart, and I could see. There was no baby left inside of me.
Yeah, beautiful poem. The villanelle is the form, and you can see that meter, that iambic pentameter. So given the just fascinating way that you talk about the way different meters sort of function in our brains, I guess, in our spirits, what is it about? We talked about this in the interview we did in Rattle, but again, for people who didn't read that, what is it about iambic that made it the one that became dominant, and what sort of mode of being does it represent? Do you think?
Mm. I mean, it was a thing that really made it dominant was because Milton used it for Paradise Lost. So culturally, that was such an incredibly influential book. It was the only book in a lot of people's house for hundreds of years.
Hmm.
So iambic just took over, and that was in such an early part of the English language, really. I mean, the English language only became English in like the 1200s, 1300s. And so, Paradise Lost was just a few hundred years after that. So almost from the birth of English, iambic was very dominant. And the other meters were only used for like ballads and songs that illiterate people, songs and poems illiterate people would say. Women were illiterate, so that included like women's stuff and children's stuff. So the other meters got really just reduced in their impact and their power from the beginning. But I also think that there's an energy to this. Like, I don't think it's a coincidence that Milton at that time chose iambic. Chaucer had used it, but his use of iambic is a little different. And then it went underground for a few hundred years. So it
Mm-hmm.
was really coming back just around that time. And in my experience, I've been working for so long, and I teach meter sometimes in a very holistic way, and I use it in kind of a ritual way. And I do a lot of spells, and I work with witches' circles. And so my sense of it with all of this experience is that iambic is a meter for thinking, for the mind, for a kind of objective, rational reality, which can be a very powerful, creative force as well. But it's I'm now working with 6 different meters that I teach in my website, Meter Magic Spiral Poetry Witch. I work with 6 different meters, and they're all wonderful, and they all work great. And so I think it's just a tragedy, actually, that most people think iambic is the only meter that's possible in English that to write good poetry. And a lot of people just you know discount, don't even take the other meters seriously. And the first poem I read was in dactyls. I mean, there's nothing unnatural about it, and I use all these meters, and my students do too. And they're just so wonderful. But by keeping iambic as the only meter, we are really, I believe, giving the mind dominance over everything else, and way disproportionately.
Yeah, and it's just so fascinating, and it must not be a coincidence that this is the era in humans' existence. I mean, we've been human beings for 200,000 years, and only these last couple hundred has the mind really dominated that sort of rational, right brain focused, model based view of the world is the one that's dominant. And God is dead, and we're living in this technological age where everything is materialistic. And at the same time, we have this one meter rising, which is the meter of the mind and the intellect. And we've sort of forgotten that we're all souls and spirits at the same time. And that's what the other meters can remind us,
Yeah.
I think. Yeah.
And bodies and hearts too. Exactly, exactly. This book here, I have all my books in a pile just because I love to show the covers of. But this one here, The Ghosted Meter, was my PhD dissertation, and I actually got into this whole awareness by scanning Emily Dickinson's poetry, Walt Whitman's poetry, and I started to think of iambic as the meter of patriarchy, imperialism, capitalism, because all these forces came up at the same time. But it was through looking at their poems, like looking at Emily Dickinson's poetry, that I first realized this, because when she uses iambic pentameter, I looked at all of her iambic pentameters and all of her work, 1,770 something poems, and there were like 100 lines of iambic pentameter in there, and they all had very similar constellations of meaning that gave me the idea that this is a meter that has that meaning. And then I found the same in other people as well. So it came out of poetry, it came out of poets' practice over hundreds of years, this awareness. It makes total sense, really.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like as you say, it just so. And right now, I'm really interested in metrical diversity, bringing the other meters back, practicing writing them and experiencing what it's like. And in the cultures that have a more vibrant connection to their oral roots, that it hasn't been destroyed completely by imperialism, you can find metrical diversity is very important in those cultures. They have lots of different meters that mean different things and that carry different energies. So there's no reason English can't get that back.
Mm-hmm.
And that's my mission right now, is to help bring it back.
Yeah, well, the next poem in line happens to be, and so one of the problems is trying to remember what each of them are called. I think Cuddle Cove, the cup wand, is that anapestic?
Anapest.
Anapestic? Okay.
Yeah,
I mean, even I've been doing this for 20
yeah.
years, and I still can't keep dactyls and anapests straight. But
Well, I have a trick for dactyls, and then you can exclude that one. So dactyls are named for the word finger, like pterodactyl means feathered finger.
oh, okay.
So if you look at your finger, you've got a longer phalange on the bottom and then two short ones. So your fingers is, in Greek, it was long, short, short. So wand, cup, cup. You just think of your finger and you know that's the dactyl.
Oh, and once I know the dactyl, I will know the other is anapest, and I have them both. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
So
exactly.
Kettle Cove is though is written in anapestic, not dimeter, not trimeter,
Is it tetrameter?
tetrameter. Yeah. See, the thing
Yeah.
is, I think these words to people who are, they come. We all come to poetry by finding a passion for that sort of both the music and like the sudden understanding that we get from reading poems, and then it feels like we're back in some kind of science class when we have to remember the anatomy of all the different measures and the beats. And so this is anapestic tetrameter, but you don't really have to know and remember the words for it, right, to appreciate and hear the music.
Don't. But when you think about it, it's really literally only 10. I mean, the maximum meters anybody would normally use is 6, I think, which is the amount I teach. And then every line of poetry is either 3 or 4 or 5 repeating units. So trimeter, 3, tetrameter, pentameter, that's basically it. So it's like a total of 10 terms. And look how much effort people put into learning anatomy or something rather than memorizing dozens and people are so smart, they learn all this stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
So 10 terms. I think there's maybe something else at play. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Okay.
Yeah, so this is a Kettle Cove. Let's hear this poem.
Through the upper and lower worlds, body and soul, through the softness and hardness, your wetness and royal, may I rock in your mystery, speaking and whole, like the rock weeds you rock in your undersea coil. You are fire in the rock and the water and wind, in the earth and the sun and the ocean and air. Like the rockweeds you rock in your undersea coil, halfway between water and earth I divide. May I rock in your mystery, speaking and whole, on your softness and hardness and wildness I ride. In the center of sunlight, I am coming true. In the pulling of ripples, I'm there. I will answer your heart with me, my heart with you, in this balance of waiting and air. I am fire in the rock and the water and wind and the earth and the sun and the ocean and air. On the point of the spray and the push of the tide, I have rocked in your mystery, speaking and whole. On your softness and hardness and wildness I ride, like the rockweeds you rock in your undersea coil.
Yeah, fascinating poem. That was Kettle Cove by Annie Finch, and that anapestic meter is the meter of Dr. Seuss for one thing, right? So with all
And Cat in
the
the Hat.
all the
Yeah,
Who's and down in Whoville, you know.
it's the wild energy. Like that came to me in that meter when I was in this incredibly gorgeous, wild coast of Maine with the spray in my face. And yeah, it's the meter of the Cat in the Hat who's like this rebel creative force, and it's a really great meter for like working up your energy or your desire, your ambition, your passion. It's a
Yeah.
fun meter for all that stuff. The meter of will.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It brings us back to poetry as a spell. You know, it's a transformative utterance is another way. You know, I mean, it's a mantra, and a mantra. The definition in the old Sanskrit is a mind tool, and it's a tool to get you into a different state, to change your state, and that's why poetry is like casting spells. That's why it has something to do with witchery. And so basically, you found poetry and you found witchcraft at like the same sort of time, and you were doing two parts and then you sort of blended them together. Can you talk about that aspect of transforming a space with poetry, and how is it different to write a poem that with that as the aim than a poem that might be a confessional style that we're all used to reading, or a lyric poem, a poem as a spell that's doing that work, like it's a certain work to be transformative of like a space instead of like a thought, maybe. Is
Yeah,
something interesting. So do you approach poems differently with that
very
in
much.
mind?
Very much. Yeah, I do. I do. That's a very interesting point. Yeah, it's true. When I look at like before I became aware of all this for years, I was like everybody else. I wrote a lot of free verse, and then I started to write iambic a lot of the time because it was around and I knew it. And then it wasn't until I did that PhD dissertation that I realized I had to write other meters if I was going to learn what I had learned from it. And then I started writing other meters, dactyls, and other ones. But um, in the beginning, it was more like using the language as a tool to work out my thoughts, like you said, um, and my ideas and myself. And I think I was much more in my own self. And when I began to work in meters, it changed me. Like I use this also as a tool for self-transformation for people who are not even poets, like teaching them to journal in these rhythms because it gets you in touch with different aspects of yourself, and that is very healing to do. You don't get so stuck in your own mind, for example, but if you're more aware of the different parts of you, like IFS is my favorite therapy. It's all about your different parts, internal family systems, IFS. um, so you have these different parts, your will, your mind, your body, your heart. So when you're aware of them all, I think you can become more balanced, and in a way you become more generous. And when you have tools also, a lot of the poets who come to me to learn poetry, they can feel very frustrated because they love poetry. They love, especially a lot of them love the sound of poetry, and they often love poetry that's in meter. Like they might love Keats or Hart Crane, or Whitman is even very rhythmic a lot of the time. They like, but they don't know how to do it. They've never learned the tools, and there are some tools, obviously. So um, I think once you get the tools, a lot of times you just want to use them, and you want to transform spaces and transform people, and you can start. I think it's much easier to write, for example, an occasional poem. Like if I I used to love, I still do, to write occasional poems for whatever occasion, like the opening of the local bar, or somebody, breaks ground to make a new fountain, and I want to write a poem for it because I think, oh, how could I do that? I could use that meter, I could use that structure. And it's like you can easily you can create something beautiful that other people don't have the skills or the knowledge to do. Like you have tools that really work. And so you don't have to know, you no longer have to worry about, oh, is this sensitive enough? Am I like a good enough human being that I can just put my naked thoughts on a page and they're good enough to like call art? You don't have to worry about that. It's like, okay, I'm doing something, I'm making something. It's more like a craft, like making a beautiful rug, or there's a humility to it as well as a certain dignity to it that I think makes it easier um, to say, okay, at a certain point in your life, in your adult life, you might get to the point, hopefully most of us do, where you're like, okay, I've spent a lot of time working on myself, making myself a better person, working through all my angst. And now I'm just going to gather myself the best I can and try to help other people. And I'm not going to foreground my own healing all the time. I'll still do it, but I don't have to like make a big deal out of it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to start to try to make the world better. And I think meter is a fantastic tool to help people through that transition in life.
Yeah, that's such a great point that we don't talk about enough. Where poets had a purpose. Writing poems for occasions was a thing that poets did. It was like a job, in understanding that a poet is a maker, and we made this thing for this moment to remember it by, and to expand our awareness of, and to think about like what we're experiencing right now more richly. And that was like a role that we had. And now, I talk to people a lot who are become poet laureate of like the city or the country or whatever, and they have to write an occasional poem. And it's like, this is not what I do. Like, how do I write in it? How do I write a poem for the inauguration?
Yeah,
when
exactly.
what I do is like search my soul and internal subconscious normally. Now
Yeah.
I'm being asked to like write something, you know, like to make sense of the moment in time in history for like a million people or whatever. How do I do that? and
Yeah,
and it
yeah,
really
you
is a
need
different
tools.
function. It's a different task.
Exactly. Totally different. And when it first started, I remember hearing an interview on the radio on NPR, maybe even before the internet, like in the 90s, maybe, when it was just starting the whole trend towards poet laureates, there didn't used to be so many of them. And it was just starting. And I remember hearing somebody being really snobby about it, like some famous poet, like, oh, I don't want to ever write occasional poems, it would be beneath me. And I think there's been a real change now in the culture. Like people are more understanding that, yeah, we have work that we can do and a contribution we can make, but how? Which is one reason I think meter is becoming um, more valued. And I'm starting to see people signing up for Poetry Witch, poetrywitch.org, Meter Magic Spiral, where like they want to learn. They come to me and they want to learn it because they're like, okay, I could use this now. I know what I would do with it.
Mm-hmm.
It's exciting. But it's not only also that poets had a job that was respected, like carpenters or something, which would be in itself wonderful. But actually, poets had a role as the central figures in the culture. Like there was incredible reverence for poets in, say, the Celtic culture and in Australian and Aboriginal culture, like a lot of cultures, the poet is the shaman, is the healer, and is the carrier of the stories and the ceremonies. And I think we still have some of that in the way we use the word poetry, like, oh, poetry in motion, or that building is a poem. It's so beautiful, right? And the architect is flattered because it's a poem, but we use the word with like no awareness anymore of how that reverence arose.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what was it that made poets so revered? I'm convinced that it was their knowledge of meter that made them so revered. Like the Celtic bards went to bard school for 25 years and they learned meters, they learned complex forms which were able to transform energy and make spells, just as they can do now. So um, it's a whole different looking at being a poet. And I sometimes feel that we almost need a different word now, for that kind of spell making poetry, and for publishing a book that might be an entire book nowadays. And just in the last few years, I've noticed you open a book of poems, or people will say, "Oh, what a great poem!" On Twitter, they'll post this beautiful poem, and it's a paragraph. Like it doesn't even have line breaks anymore. So, a poem now, I guess it just means lyrical writing, really.
Hmm.
But I almost feel like maybe we need a different kind of terminology so we can start to distinguish. I mean, that stuff is fine, but it's different, I
Yeah.
think.
Hmm. Yeah, it's so interesting to think about that. How we use the word poetry. Like you'd see an athlete doing some amazing, action. You say that's poetry in motion, and like it's this revered thing, and yet there's not a lot of reverence going on. If you ask, somebody asks on the plane what you do for a living, and you're like, I'm a poet. That's not
Right.
something that makes a lot of sense. Or like thinking about like how Plato threw poets out of the Republic as one of his things. Like why would you bother
Yeah.
doing that? It just seems silly at this point because we don't have that space that we used to. Um,
Well, he probably threw them out because he was scared of them because they
yeah,
had such
exactly.
powerful
But
tools,
how
right?
could you be scared of poets? Why is Annie Finch so scary? but
Yeah, but I am, and like theoret I mean, I just want to say in terms of the plane, like so this book calendar is sitting here on my pile. And when this came out, I remember I had it on a plane, and the person next to me was, an ordinary, like whatever they were, just a regular person, maybe somebody in the military or something. But when I said my poetry rhymes, his ears perked up, he got all excited, and he really liked it and ended up buying the book. And I do think that the average person maybe has more value, finds more value in something that has structure to it
mhm.
and meter, because for the same reasons we were saying, it's just more of a something you can offer to the culture.
Yeah. There's a question or a comment more from Mark Grenier that sort of brings up something interesting. And I lost it. What did he say? He says, sometimes I feel, and this goes back to something I always thought, but talking to you made me realize was wrong. But I always thought that iambic was the dominant because it was the heartbeat. And you said, no, but
That's
it's
what
not the
everybody
heartbeat
says.
because look at an actual heartbeat and it's not that simple. And really, the heart, heavier beat of a heartbeat comes first. So a heartbeat is more like a trochee even than a dactyl, or I mean, than
Yeah.
an iamb. And Mark Grenier says, I sometimes feel that trochaic feet rather than iambic is the most natural for American English as opposed to the British English where iambic is more natural. Do you feel like there's anything there to that? The British versus American English has a difference?
That's really interesting. I mean, if you go back to the Anglo-Saxon, their meter was based, it was accentual meter like Beowulf or whatever, but it's mostly trochees and dactyls, like it's a falling rhythm. What way garden in your deum feud cunninga thrim yafrunan hutha athalingus ellen thamadan offshield shaving shaven athratum. Those are all trochees right there. That's the fourth line of Beowulf. Offshield shaving shaven athratum. Bum 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 bum. So that would be the original British. But when I'm thinking about it now, maybe the stiff upper lip thing is a little more iambic. I can kind of, and then rap is often more trochaic too, I
Hmm.
think. So yeah, maybe American English is more trochaic. I'll look into that. I'll start listening. I can believe that.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, let's hear another poem. Next one is a shorter one, Amulet for Brave Women. And this one is in that dactylic meter.
Yeah. And this is a triolet, which is a really fun form. It has a lot of repetition in it. Women have voices it's time to believe in. Brave women's words spoken out, clear and steady, move us through generous ways of achieving. Women have voices it's time to believe in, braiding sweet worlds. This brave, loving weaving is singing our lives back, and women are ready. Women have voices. It's time to believe in brave women's words spoken out, clear and steady.
Yeah, so that poem, another spell, was Amulet for Brave Women. And you can see, the different purpose in writing a poem like that versus a lyric poem. A really great example of that, and how the meter, um, how the meter works to push forward that, create that space. So how, I think you mentioned it
Yeah,
before, but how do you think of the dactyl, that stress, unstressed, the wand, cup,
yeah.
foot? How do you think of that as functioning versus the other ones?
That's right. And this one actually was an occasional poem. It was commissioned for a meeting of the main women's lobby, like a political organization. So yeah, I did want it to be a spell for empowerment. And the dactyl to me is a meter of the heart, of emotion, of flow. Um, and when I wrote this one, I was just starting to think about that, the distinction between the different meters and what they mean. But so sometimes I wonder, should I have made an anapest, which would be more like the, you know, rev up people's energy meter. But I do love that it's dactyls because I think it's a plea for opening the heart to women's energy, and I guess it does make sense that it's dactyls. Yeah, I've noticed even when like people are talking in daily speech, they will, when they fall into a dactylic meter, I notice that they are often speaking from the heart. It's kind of amazing.
Yeah, it is so
And you've done,
fascinating. Yeah, and I think we talked about James Pennebaker's work, The Secret Life of Pronouns, and the way he can use
yeah,
just by text analyzing the number of certain pronouns, whether or not people are being honest and things like that. But I don't think to my mind, and I should send him your work so he can work on that and his algorithms. But using meters like that and seeing where the meters appear. And it's something that you could analyze in a really quantitative, scientific way, and I think prove your points that you've intuited and hear as you're moving through poems and regular
yeah,
speech. Let's keep the poems flowing, and let's do a Samhain next, because there's another meter. This is the trochaic
yeah,
meter.
trochees, right,
Yeah.
exactly. Okay, yeah, this is a Halloween poem. Um, there's also a couple of other fun trochees, witchy ones near the end. Um, okay, yeah, this is a Halloween poem. Samhain, which is the witchy Celtic Wheel of the Year name for Halloween. And of course, it's the time when the veil between the dead and the living is the thinnest. October 31st. In the season leaves should love, since it gives us leave to move through the wind towards the ground they were watching as they hung. Legend says there is a seam stitching darkness like a name. Now, when dying grasses veil earth from the sky in one last pale wave, and autumn dies to bring winter back, and then the spring, we who die ourselves can peel back another kind of veil that hangs among us like thick smoke. Tonight, at last, I feel it shake. I feel the night stretching away, thousands long behind the days, till they reach the darkness where all of me is ancestor. I turn my hand and feel a touch move with me, and when I brush my young mind across another, I am with my mother's mother. Sure as footsteps in my waiting self, I find her, and she brings arms that have answers for me, intimate, a waiting bounty. Follow me. She leaves this trail through a shutter in the veil and leaves like amber where she stays, a gift for her perpetual gaze.
Yeah, another beautiful poem, and you really hear the music in that. That was Samhain by Annie Finch, and so tell us about the trochaic meter. I'm just fascinated by the way that the
Yeah,
meters are different from each other. And I'm sorry for it being a generic sort of way to move through the episode, but I find it
I
fascinating. So
love
what is the trochaic
it.
meter like?
Well, this is a really interesting meter because I find it is the meter of the body and the earth. So it's got a very grounded, powerful strength to it. And it can really like gin up energy, like a lot of political slogans are in trochaic meter, like, no, no, we won't go. Or a lot of times they, there's different getting your digging your feet in the ground type of thing. Um, and yet at the same time, and also spells, witches spells, like on TV shows or in Harry Potter or whatever, they're often in trochees. And Macbeth, the witches, double bubble, toil and trouble. So it's a kind of meter that I feel it almost pulls power from the earth to make a very strong kind of a spell. Um, but it's not just physical, like because we carry so many emotions in our bodies and we have so much intuition, so much body knowing in our bodies that sometimes I think of it more as the meter of the true self. the meter of going inward to our deepest, truth, like our tree, the etymology of truth, tree, that kind of rootedness in ourselves. So it's not necessarily as simple as just the body, but it's like that kind of individual knowing, as opposed to the dactyl, which is like the heart that connects us with the hearts of other people, that opens us up, or the amphibrach, which is the meter of spirit, which is more like connecting us spiritually to something bigger. But troches is like about our individual life on this earth, our body, just our true self in that sense of knowing our boundaries. So again, this is a poem that I wrote before I really became aware of these connections, and I think I probably picked it because it's a spooky meter that people would think of for a Halloween meter. But I really love it because even though I think of connecting with my grandmother as a very spiritual kind of a thing, in this case, it's grounded in my individual identity. So it's like a way of claiming her power for my own personal self in my life. And I love that.
What was the name of that meter you were just talking about? The
Troche.
No, not troche.
Oh,
the one after that.
Amphibrach.
Amphibrach. That's a tough one. So what is amphibrach? Is that
Yeah,
that
I
is
might have put.
Yeah.
I might have included one in here. I used to keep it until the very end of my classes because I considered it almost like esoteric knowledge. I wasn't sure if people should learn it until they had already kind of gotten comfortable with the others. But there is one here, the last one, to Entozaki Shange. That poem is Zaki's Dance is Amphibrach. So that's the meter that I associate with the spirit. It's a very unusual meter. And once you hear it, you can't ignore it. It's the meter of limericks. Bum, 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 bum. But like there's a whole book that I contributed to, this book of essays in the 90s where somebody was saying amphibrachs don't exist in English. They just don't exist.
Oh, wow.
They're all anapests in disguise. And I don't know why they wanted to pick on the amphibrach, but it does exist. It really does. And there have been amazing poems written in this meter, actually. So
yeah, do you want to read that one? That'd be fascinating.
Sure,
Zaki's Dance. Yeah.
Yeah, the lines are a little short, but I'll give you so people can recognize it. Like there's a famous long poem in the 19th century that kids used to memorize in school called The Old Oaken Bucket. It's a very sentimental poem, and I just love it. It's describing like the well with the bucket hanging in it and how much this person remembers it from childhood and misses this bucket. So it's like, how dear to my heart are the scenes of my childhood when fond recollection presents them to view. And then it goes, the old oaken bucket, the old mossy bucket that hung in the well, bump, 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 like that. That's the rhythm. So this is called Zaki's Dance for Entozaki Shange, who was my teacher. You came with your own things, O lioness teacher, your battles draped over your body like kisses. You came with your own things, O moon-loving preacher. Your courage's dance flew behind you in yeses. You came with your own things, O honey-eyed speaker, your definite heart raising dreams beyond wishes. You came with your own things. You knew how to reach her, O queen's independence, O peace beyond riches. You came with your own things, heart's maker and seeker. The links of such loving grow sisters, grow witches.
Yeah, really interesting meter there. That's Zaki's Dance, and way different read, a different energy you can feel as you read that poem versus the other poems that had a real like a movement to them. These are sort of a slower, deeper kind of sense of motion. I think
it's a rocking, right?
Yeah,
The troches and the dactyls are falling. They start with the wand and go to the cup, right? But this one rocks back and forth. So it sort of holds you in the present. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's fascinating. I should say two things. If anybody has any questions for Annie Finch, please do leave them in the comments. It helps if you put questions all in bold or something like that so I can see it. And then also, if you haven't yet, please do click the like button. It really helps poetry spread around. The algorithms care, even if you don't. So click the like button and help more people find all these different meters and the beautiful music and the power of speech. So there was a question, which is something I was going to ask. Dick Westheimer wanted to know, does the choice of meter come to you before you start a poem or after you've written a few lines? Normally I would think, that, for me, the way I usually write, you sort of get a little bit of music with the first couple lines, and then it's like riffing and playing off that, the regularity, the beats of that make the rest of the poem. But given that where you've picked up on the way that different meters come from different sections of your being, is it more prescribed that you say, this poem needs to be in this meter?
Yeah, it's that's a really good question, and it can go either way. Like in Yeah, I'd say it can go either of those ways. It can go a third way as well. So sometimes definitely I'll just be like, you know, just in a musing state of mind, or I'll be walking or something, and it'll just come into my head in a certain rhythm, and then I'll be like, this is the meter that's been given to me, so I'll follow it. But sometimes, especially with like an occasional poem, I might get a sense of it. Like my hands will get kind of all excited, like you're gonna sculpt something, and I'll be like, "Oh, I would love to play with that form or that meter." So it's just a very like a desire to work with it, or it wants to be expressed in that way. And then the third way is that sometimes it really changes. Like I've had poems like in this book, Calendars, the last poem in the book, it's Ars Poetica called Encounter. And that one, I had it for years in iambic meter, and I couldn't finish the poem. And then finally, I realized it was in the wrong meter. And as soon as I changed it to dactyls, then I was able to finish the poem. So sometimes in the process of revision, it changes.
Oh, yeah, that's really interesting. There's another question from Paul Bernstein, which we sort of answered, but maybe we should do it more directly, I think. He said, where did you learn what the meter of spirit, earth, mind, heart, etc. were? And of course, that was, you developed this through your I think your Ph.D. thesis, right? Which became the Ghost of Meter, looking at free verse and what was going on when people were using, sort of subconsciously, when they were writing free verse, what meters they were using without really thinking about it, and then what they were doing and what modes of being they were. So this is your entire, body of, direct research, which you don't see very often in the poetry world.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that was the initial impetus, was completely out of scholarship. And then at the same time, in my personal life, I was becoming a witch. And so I began to apply it into my rituals. Like I'd bring poems into my circle, and like, I want to write invocations, let's try them out, see how they work. And I would get input from the other witches. And so that's how it got more refined over a long period of time, and also from teaching. So it was a combination really of, actually of the, I do everything in 5 directions now, not just meters, but I do everything in 5 directions. So when I think about this whole theory, really developed out of the will, mind, body, heart, and spirit, in a sense. But a lot of it was originally intellectual, but it also became out of my spiritual practice and my teaching practice, and also my performance practice, because I love to use these things when I perform, and you can tell whether it's hitting or not, and then digest it.
Yeah. Well, let's do 2 more poems if you have time. We'll do one more and then talk a bit and then do a last one. Do you want to do witches next, maybe?
Sure. Speaking of.
Yeah, exactly.
And this was they're just the premiere. This was set to music, and I just was at the premiere like 2 days ago. It was really fun. It was sung by a choir. Fire and air and water and land, power grows where witches stand. Power above, power below, witches shall find high and low. Witches shall believe in earth, birth in body, darker birth. Power before and matrix after. Witches shall believe in laughter. Birth in spirit, center, love. Witches shall believe and move.
Yeah, that was Witches by Annie Finch. Annie, one thing I want to talk a little bit about, while we have a bit of time, I always find the magical nature of poetry really fascinating. Maybe the primary thing that I love poetry about. There's some mystery to it, where we can sort of, see the future. We can change our way of thinking. There's all these things that we can know things that we didn't know. And there's sort of two ways to explain that. There's the sort of differences between our right and left brain, and the way that we're really two hemispheres, and one's more bodily and holistic, and the one that's sort of more narrowly focused is sort of dominant. And so if you're like moving with your body, like when you're writing, I'm sure, you get the meter going, and then it's sort of spontaneously generating words like through your body. And so it's sort of, in a way, the knowledge of your body is like one explanation. But then there's some deeper magic too, or explanation, that there's this sort of collective unconscious, and we're tapping into something bigger than ourselves. And the universe is not what it seems to be, and everything is Maya. It's all an illusion, and we're really just all connected in like three-dimensional holograms on the surface of an n-dimensional black hole, and like all that stuff. And I don't know which way to go. I don't know if maybe it can be both, but do you lean toward one or the other? Is it more just your body knowing things, like a bodily knowledge is coming out? Or is it more a broader spiritual collective knowledge that's coming out with poems?
Well, I'm a goddess worshiper, and I think witchcraft is the remnants of the matriarchal culture, which used to be all around the earth and is now mostly in indigenous cultures and in sort of forgotten pockets of the earth. But I spent, as I think I mentioned, I was in India for 3 months recently, traveling into matriarchal parts of India, and I'm really quite sure that our species is originally matriarchal, and one of the characteristics of matriarchal culture is your goddess worshiping. So the interesting difference between goddess worship and God worship, there are a few interesting differences. One of them is that God worship becomes monotheistic because the gods literally kill each other off until there's only one left. But with goddesses, there are always many, 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 many goddesses. It's thousands of them, like really polytheistic. But the other big difference is that goddesses, the body and the spirit are connected. They're not separate. And so you don't have that thing of dark versus light, death versus life versus death, good versus evil, all the binaries. You just don't have them. So the body knowledge is the goddess, is the spirit, like from the goddess perspective. And I now actually feel I'm working on a scholarly book again, my first one since The Ghost of Meter went for my dissertation. The new one I'm putting together a proposal for is a book called Metrical Witchcraft, and it makes I think the thesis is going to be that meter is the language of the goddess, and that matriarchal cultures around the world use meter as a ceremonial tool for spiritual work. And so I think, that really would kind of explain why we still feel that magical spiritual aspect to poetry. And then if you think about it as like the kind of human mycelium where we're thinking and feeling and spirit and body all at once, because that's how the goddess is. There's no separation between those things, and one is not better than another. So I've got my tattoo here on my arm, which shows 5 different colors, equal in like sort of a beach ball shape. And it's they symbolize the will, mind, body, heart, spirit, like equal. And they're all infused through spirit, which is at the center. But so in a way, there doesn't have to be that conflict, I think. So that's why I love meter, because it brings me back to the space where there's no conflict between all that.
Yeah, it is. I mean, there's every, all those dichotomies, the yin yang, the hunter gatherer, the right left, the brain, all those things. It's the whole nature of sort of everything is to be sort of both things at once on some kind of continuum, as if we are just strings. So it's fascinating. One last question.
Without being in conflict.
Yeah, exactly. One last question on a technical level, and this is an interesting one, I think. Chelsea McClellan wants to know, do you have any specific advice on how many exceptions to the meter is too much for you, or is it purely by feel? And that's something that, because we talk about meter, and if it has a certain number of, beats, stresses, wands, and a line, that's what it makes. But you want variation at the same time.
Yeah, you do. Yeah, sure. That's a fantastic question. And if you're asking a question like that, I hope you'll check out Meter Magic Spiral, which is my teaching community, because we love to talk about stuff like that. But I'll also mention this book, How to Scan a Poem, which I wrote with my student, Autumn Newman, who's a really brilliant young poet in meter. And Autumn, when she was teaching in Meter Magic Spiral for a while, she had a rule that she liked, which was the 80-20 rule, which she developed out of her own teaching. You know, if you have like 80% in the meter, then people can recognize it, and 20% will allow some variation. So that worked for her and for some of the people she was teaching. So that's one you would consider. Autumn Newman is her name. Check out her work and check her out on Instagram. She's wonderful.
Yeah, that's so interesting that so many things are 80-20. That's what I was going to suggest, is maybe just by my hunch would be, you know, you want 80% to be the foot you're using, and then 20% variation.
But I would also just say it really is, I mean, it works for her for teaching. I love it. But if in my practice, I don't do that because I feel it depends so much on the individual poems. And like some poems only, like Edna St. Vincent Millay, for example, let alone somebody like, you know, Alexander Pope or something, they don't have any variations at all in terms of the meter. It's only like the weight of the syllables a little bit, like slight shadings of consonants and vowels, but the meter could be completely regular. But the syntax and the word music within the actual syllables of consonants and the sound of the letters would be enough to create variety. So you really don't need a lot of variety. You don't necessarily. You can do a lot with enjambment. It's a matter of personal taste. So to go from like, you know, Edna St. Vincent Millay, like some of her best poems have literally 2 variations, you know, maybe 1 extra syllable somewhere, and it's great. It's not boring at all. Or going on the other extreme to Dylan Thomas, who will really mess with it a lot. Or for me, it might vary on the poem. You know, some poems are much more regular, like My Baby Fell Apart. That probably didn't have any variations, or very few. But other of my poems are full of variations. So it's really an aesthetic choice, but I think Autumn may be very right that 80-20 is a good rule when you're starting out.
Yeah, well, really interesting too. And you know, that 80-20, you know, we have 5 fingers, there's 5 directions like you're talking about, 5 meters that you're talking about. So there's some kind of rule of 5 hidden in there too. You know, one of the 5 being different, which is interesting too. Anyway, let's close out with the Empress card. I think would be a good one to end on.
Okay. Well, this is based on a tarot card originally. Still seated with moons, her unfazed avatars. Her draped robes are reddening so patiently. The folds of grain, tree, and her great body spanning the old and new thrones. Come and sit here to free the quick cupping water, its scimitars fanning and looming past time. Come, let her sparkles be the fruit of our queendom. Let's turn into stars, grow back into bloom through her sweet distaff's planning. Come, spiral these roots past the voices of wars.
Yeah, that was the Empress card from Annie Finch. Annie, thanks so much for being a guest. It was so fun to talk to you. The hour just flew by, over an hour, really. And it feels like it was just a few minutes. But it's great to talk to you. It's such a fascinating topic. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. I love what you're doing here. I love the show so much. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you. Yeah, and that was Annie Finch. You can find all of Annie's work at anniefinch.com. She also included, if you have... If you look at the show notes, she included a whole bunch of links. There's 4 extra links this week, besides for anniefinch.com, about all the different places you have to learn about meter. And so she has a how to scan a poem video. She has a whole Substack on scansion. She's got how to scan a poem book, and then an ebook version too. So find all those links in the show notes. If you came a little late, I added them at the last minute. So if you came and you might want to refresh your page to find those links, but do find them and learn a whole lot about meter.
Spiral should be there too. I did a poetrywitch.org. I hope we can add it later.
Yeah, definitely. We can add anything. Yeah, poetrywitch.org. There's a whole community, we should say, out here that Annie's building, using meter to be more connected with the world in our lives. And it's a wonderful thing. Yeah, thanks always. It's so fun talking to you, Annie. Always a pleasure.
Thank you, Tim.
Yep.
Wonderful.
Thanks. Take care. Yeah, once again, that was Annie Finch. And anniefinch.com is the best website to find her. Now we're going to go to our prompt lines. And the prompt for this week was this. Let me put it up on the screen. The prompt was, write a poem set in a place you've always dreamed of going to but never have. Allude to all the basic 5 senses. That is your prompt for this week. Find that. And it was actually, you had 2 weeks to write it, because I haven't even mentioned we were off last week having a good time at the Grand Canyon with Katie and our kids. So you had 2 weeks to write this poem. Write a poem set in a place you've always dreamed of going to, but never have. Allude to all the basic senses. And now if you'd like to share a poem, all you have to do is email it first to promptlines@rattle.com. That's promptlines, all one word, at rattle.com, so I can show it on the screen. And then find the Zoom link, which I'm about to deploy, in the chat windows on Facebook and YouTube. Only join the stream if you'd like to share a poem, though. The stream will continue on YouTube and Facebook and Twitter, so sit right where you are, and then you get to see the poems too. But if you want to share something, join this Zoom link to share the poem after you email it over to promptlines@rattle.com. There is a one-page max, keep in mind, and where it's the spirit of a one-page max rule. We'll talk about that a little bit. But otherwise, keep watching. So either join or keep watching, and we'll be right back with a whole lot more poetry. And we're back. Now, as always, we have our prompt poems editor, Katie Dozier, here. How you doing, Katie?
I'm doing great. I love that interview. I learned so much. I needed to get out a notebook. That's a rarity for the Rattlecast, but it was great.
Yeah, Annie's just full of wisdom. And in that book, The Ghost of Meter, and then Measure for Measure, which we haven't mentioned either. If anybody liked all the meters that we're hearing in these poems, it's a book that categorizes poems by meter and finds all those sort of less common than iambic meters. And we talked about that in the print interview too, but it's a fascinating book, and Annie's got a whole lot of stuff to share. So really fun talking to her, as it always is, and witchery too. And poetry is spells. That's close to my heart. I love that topic too. So it's really fun talking to her.
Yes. Yeah, it was great.
So the prompt for this week was, we had 2 weeks to write this. It was write a poem set in a place you've always dreamed of going to, but never have, and allude to all the basic senses. So what did you come up with, Katie?
Well, first of all, happy Father's Day.
Oh, thank you.
Also, but it was funny because having a little bit longer to write this poem, I think I was bound to go in a little bit more off the wall kind of direction, because it was interesting trying to think, because I traveled a lot when I was little. My mom was a flight attendant, and we got to take these cool trips. When I called my dad earlier for Father's Day, we were reminiscing about some random things, and so that was fun. But I went in a different direction to all of that. So,
well, interesting. Let's hear it.
I also am totally skirting the line. It's exactly a page. I had to make the title the same size font as the rest of the poem in order to fit, but it fits. So it's one page. Okay. So this is home.
Okay.
Of all the places I've never known, there's the one with apple trees and green shutters that never close. Green shutters that never need to do more than frame the paintings being brushed inside. 4 children, maybe more to come. But most of all, one roof. Most of all of us underneath it. And when it rains, which I know sometimes it must, what fun to just run from room to room, plunking down plastic buckets on the old oak floor, as if the worst a storm could do was tickle us. And that thunder, too, a beat we do the electric slide to in our PJs. Wait, can you smell that? Thousands and thousands of chocolate chip cookies baking, how their gooey warmth melts upon our tongues. Birthday sprinkles slide down the staircase, lit by the heat from 100 tiny candles. Like a trick, even when blown out, how they seem to still be lit. Look out, the pantry's overstuffed with hugs. Now turn to the front porch swings, hear their specific kind of cricket creaking. We rock so hard that we outbuzz mosquitoes. Never quite sure if we're watching the lilac sky of a sunrise or a sunset. Either way, never quite caring. And never quite knowing if such a place is real or just a red front door with a cold gold knob. But either way, here I am, knocking.
Oh, that's great. Love that ending, especially, and a personally meaningful poem. If everybody hasn't noticed, Katie and I are bouncing back and forth between Texas and California, and this time we are in Texas and California. So one roof would definitely be nice. I would love
One
that.
roof would be preferable.
It definitely would.
But we're lucky to have two, so there's that.
That is very true. Yeah, so wonderful poem, Katie. And I love that ending especially, and it's so strange because my poem has a door and a knob too.
Oh, really?
So,
And
yeah.
we're trying this out too because there's always like, should I put the poem in the document before so Tim sees it before? So I told him not to read it first this week.
Yeah, I didn't. Yeah, I did not. So I had
So
no
I
idea
didn't
that you were
post
going to have a
mine.
knob. And the knob in my brain was gold and cold, even though I didn't write those words.
You didn't go for such a bold rhyme there?
I did not. But anyway, so my poem is this, and for me, the first two things came to mind I've already written about, which is there was a prompt that was a different prompt, but it was like something about regrets or something, where I talked about like wanting to go to Antarctica. And that was the first thought, because I always think it'd be cool to go to Antarctica. But I have that poem from like 2 or 3 years ago. And then I had another poem about like a home being the place that I'd want to be, kind of. And that's the second thought. So I had to think really deeply. I was on a hike with the kids thinking about what I could do, where I would want to go. Because I'm not like, a place, I don't know. It's not really, something more hypothetical seemed to fit. But then I thought about about psychedelics. And I don't know if I've talked about this with Katie much, but
That's quite a transition.
that is. So there's this drug. I'd like to do some pharmaceutical tourism at some point, Katie. So I don't know. But there's this drug called ayahuasca in the Amazon. It's a shamanistic drug. I think I was talking to, knowing I was going to be talking to Annie Finch too. And this is the sort of a drug of divination. It's really, it's a tea that's made in the Amazon in Peru and Brazil by the indigenous people there that takes a vine that has a lot of DMT in it. And then there's this like sort of weed that you add to the tea that turns off your liver so it doesn't metabolize the DMT. And then you're like, it's just flowing through you for a long time. And
Wow.
so you get this trip that lasts like 3 days. And it's very like spiritual. And people really say, I know I'm looking at your face and you're skeptical. But, it is a kind of spiritual journey. So I was thinking about that as a thing. I mean, that's one thing, because there's something about poetry that taps into that, I think. Our pituitary gland makes DMT in a little tiny dose, and there's something about what it does to the visual cortex and the spontaneous way we generate thoughts and images, and it'd just be an interesting like deep dose of poetry or something to go to the Amazon and anyway, so that is my poem, and it reminded me too of my one experience with any kind of psychedelics. So here is my poem called Ayahuasca. If I were to touch again that door to the where I was, what lies would lie in the knob, whose shrieks would be housed in the hinges. If the wood smelled of wood, what would it mean? If the tea tastes of earth, are we eating the earth? The only trip that I've taken was brief. I was unfolded in the folds of a sheet. It blew at the whim of a fan at the edge of a dorm room desk. The fabric of the curtain was cheap. Every thread I could see was a world, and I was a hair in one thread of a braid in a world. But then the girl I was with saw a fly that she knew was a robot, programmed by her father to read her thoughts. She ran from the room, and I followed, slamming the door that was only a door. So that was my one psychedelic experience. It was cool for about 30 seconds until the person I was with flipped out, and then I crashed back to reality.
I am
You are
not
not
the
the
girl.
girl, unfortunately.
No, I'm not the girl
You
with
would
the
not flip
fly.
out, which is why we have to take a trip down to the
All
Amazon.
right. That's an unexpected direction.
That definitely was. But anyway, and I was going to say too, and I forgot, so this poem was actually 2 pages long, but only because it has the tiny, tiny lines. It's like 2 or 3 words a line. And, if you do, it's a spirit of a 1-page poem. I could have like made the lines longer and it would have fit. But, if it's like that, I think it's fine. It's a spirit-based rule. Would you agree, Katie Dozier?
I would agree, since I don't think Zachary Honeycutt is on the line. I'll talk to him about it individually.
Well, I think he violates
His spirit is a big spirit, which is why we love him, of course.
That is very true. All right.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for sharing that, and hope to see you in a little bit, Katie, as we go through other poems. Let's go first to a poet who is usually toward the end of the line and now was first in the door. Speaking of doors, Jared Campbell is here. Hey, Jared.
Oh. Hey, how's it going?
Hey, great to see you. Thanks for being here and sharing another poem.
Yeah, good to see you.
So, and actually, I forgot in all that to pull up the actual prompt lines and sign in. So give me 1 second. But what did you write about, or how do you want to preface this at all?
Well, yeah, I've always wanted to go to Yellowstone. Never been to Yellowstone National Park.
Yeah.
Always been curious about it. So that's what I've got.
Yeah, I'd never been to the Grand Canyon in a similar way, and so but I couldn't because we just went to the Grand Canyon last week, so
Well,
that didn't work.
Yeah. What's the kind of how I think Annie Finch was saying that trochaic-based meters reminded her of the Earth. It's an earthy kind of meter. So this one is in catalectic trochaic tetrameter.
Oh my God, that's a mouthful. I have no idea what that even means.
Well, the catalectic means that you delete one of the unstressed syllables, which hers was. That was kind of the base meter as well. Is so trochaic tetrameter, but the final unstressed syllables left off.
Okay. Well, interesting. That's a new word that I'll never remember. So thanks for sharing that. Okay, let's hear Yellowstone.
Okay. Engelmann spruce and white bark pine shiver in the morning frost. Elk are bugling their lust in piercing otherworldly whine. Two bulls clash. Entangled how all the rutting strong are caught. They fight the fight their fathers fought. The victor licks the reeking cow. Bison grazing in the dale watch a woman drawing near to frame a smartphone photo clear enough to post. A charging male gores and throws her in the air. Bison stand and chew their cud while the woman loses blood. Other tourists stand and stare. Bubbles push up through the clay, erupting with the sulfur smell that to our fathers augured hell, but the wildlife thrives. The spray of a geyser rises, forms a rainbow, and returns to earth. The caldera flaunts its worth. Buried, the volcano churns.
Oh, very interesting Yellowstone poem. And we forget that it's the most recently active supervolcano on Earth too. So important. Right. Yeah, important thing to remember there. Yeah, very cool poem. Thanks for sharing that. Very vid.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jared. It was Jared Campbell with Yellowstone. Let's go next to the people that have tough times. Siobhan Brownlee is, of course, in France, where it's like 4 a.m. or something. Hey, Siobhan, how you doing?
Hello. 3:30.
3:30. There you go.
It's not so bad.
Well, it's so cool that you stay up late. Hopefully, you don't have to, get up early in the morning.
No, I don't. Monday. I can sleep in. Okay. So yes, I've traveled a lot. So I didn't really have any particular place that I wanted to go to on this planet. But I had when I was young, I used to watch a program. People old like me will know the science fiction program television series Star Trek, and there was a particular episode when I was 9 years old called The Empath, and I always wanted to go to that place, be like the people there that had a special power. And so I'll just bring it up. So the lady's name that she was given is Gem, and it's kind of quite boring because it's in iambic pentameter. No experimenting here, because it's a Shakespearean sonnet, and it's called Gem's Land. For all these years I've kept within my mind wafting robes of tinkling lilac blue, in starkly laid out hall and bench confined. Rose perfume rises from her skin, and through the haze I see she takes a peach to taste. The starship captain is dropped inside the wall, with bloody torture wounds on limbs and face. Brown eyes of hers show pain and shoulders fall. She softly moves beside the captain's arm, extends her hand to touch the deepened gash. Her fingers stroke above the wound. Her palm transfers to her the sight of hurt. A flash, the gash is gone. The power to heal is the land I've dreamed to reach since childhood's pails of sand.
Oh, that's beautiful. I always love a sonnet. And I was thinking about going into a science fiction direction too. I'd love to see another planet before I die. But Gemsland sounds especially wonderful. Love that sonnet. Thanks for sharing that. And the iambic meter, which is my favorite meter, I have to say. Even listening to all the other ones, I'm still an I am man, you could say.
Okay, good. Okay.
Well,
thanks very much. Thank you.
Thanks, Siobhan.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
That was Siobhan Brownlee with Gemsland. And let's go next to Nivedita Karthik, who, of course, is in India. So it's very early in the morning there, and she's on a break at work. Hey, Nivi, how you doing tonight?
Hey, Tim, I'm doing good. Thank you. How about you?
Great. It's good to see you again. It's been a little bit, and glad to have you on.
Yeah, I had to travel a bit for work and stuff, and the internet connection wasn't that great. So I didn't have enough bandwidth to actually join the call last week.
Yeah. Well, I'm great. It's great to have you here. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So where's the place that you dreamed of?
I went metaphysical.
Uh-huh.
So the place I dreamed of was peace.
Oh, that would be a wonderful place. I agree.
It's called I Dream of a Place. I dream of a place called peace, not found on maps or whispered of in travelers' tales. I see it in the yellow flowers nestled in a basket on the windowsill, an ever-present reminder of nature's quiet grace. I hear it in the merry ticking of the wall clock, marking time with a gentle, rhythmic heartbeat. I taste it in a warm cup of hot chocolate, rich and velvety, with a dollop of cream and a dusting of cocoa powder, each sip a hug from deep within. I smell it in the inviting aroma of freshly baked vanilla cupcakes, warm and inviting, a scent that welcomes and lingers for long after. I touch it in the warmth of the gently shining sun, its rays a soft caress on my skin, like the touch of a loved one. Peace is a place I have yet to visit, but in every quiet moment it comes to me, whispering tales of what awaits.
Oh, I love that ending. Yeah, really, really beautiful poem. Thanks for sharing that, Nivi.
Thank you, Tim.
Yeah.
Have a good evening.
Yep, have a great day. Yeah, there's Nivedita Karthik with I Dream of a Peace. And next in line, we have Joe Cottonwood.
Yeah, I think I'm unmuted.
Hey, Joe, good to see you.
Hi, it's been a while.
Yeah, it has.
Well, I tried to allude to the basic senses in this plus one more. I added a sense of time I was trying to bring in. Mm-hmm. And the place is a place I've never been, a sort of utopian post-war small town America, mm-hmm. which to me is a place and time that never existed except in our memories.
Yeah, good point.
Trying to put that into get that sense in the poem. So here it is. It's called A Song of One Word. One word in two notes, from belly to bosom to mouth and cupped hands, a high note, then a low, Joey. Stepping from a kitchen's steamy armpit cloud, from green beans and bacon fat to screen door slam, she would sing, Joey. A voice that carried through twilight air, chilling the hair we had yet to grow. Birds would hush. No dog barked. Airplanes paused mid-air. We scattered across dandelion lawns, barefoot, tickling feet to homes of camel smoke with Crisco chicken, the freedom, the time, the song, a belfry bell, Joey, what never existed, we remember so well.
Oh, I love that, Joe, and a great performance of it too. Really, a song of one word. Really, really love that. Thanks for sharing it.
I think I got some meter in there, but I couldn't tell you what.
Yeah, I think you did. I think you got the ear for it, and then some rhymes pulled in there, and then the great expression too of the Joey. Really, really cool reading. Thanks for sharing it.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was Joe Cottonwood with a song of one word. Next up, we have Hamat Malak.
Hi.
Hi, good to see you.
Good to see you too. I've got a hyben.
Oh, nice. we definitely love hybens around these parts.
I've never written one before. And my place is just the escape place, somewhere that someone escaped to, wherever that would be. It's called Aerodynamic Drag, with an epigraph from Richard Bach. Why fly? Simple. I'm not happy unless there's some room between me and the ground. When Anna, the mum with 6 kids, called me from the airport to say she was leaving, assuring me it's true, most of me was horrified. Her youngest was 4. The other part of me was all awe and starstruck and longing. I smelt pineapple. Are there pineapples there? So fragrant I could taste it before my tongue. Rivers of sweet juice running down my arms, sticky in the impossible sun. But me, who peels prawns with knife and fork, didn't care. I walked along that beach, sand painting my rivers, painting my body with fuck it all. Seabirds screeched messages from home, but I don't speak seabird. I adjusted my bikini, and walked barefoot with my always dressed feet, scratching up my pedicure like a wild thing. The rumble of a huge plane rattled the shells in my hand as it passed. The phone at my ear beeped in time with the washer announcing the end of the cycle, taking flight above the noise.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I love the hyben form. Aerodynamic drag, a great use, I think, of all the principles of hyben, having those jumps and cuts between all 3 elements. I really loved each of them. Thanks for sharing that, Hamat.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thanks.
Bye.
That was Hamat Malak with Aerodynamic Drag. Really cool hyben. Next, let's go to Douglas Silver.
Hi, Tim, Katie,
Hey,
all the
Douglas.
poets.
Yeah, great to see you.
Good to see you as well. I emailed a piece in called This Place I've Never Been, sent it in this morning. It was a really fun process as usual writing this. At first I thought of all the places I'd like to visit, of course, just literal places. Then I decided to be a little less specific with this, of course, and just go with the theme more or less.
Yeah, interesting.
And I enjoyed the structure with the 5 senses, an opening and closing couplet. It added up to 14 lines. So I said, time for an American sonnet right there. I got 14 lines.
Perfect.
And maybe not so much of a rhyme scheme, but, hopefully some rhythm and meter to it. Here it is. This place I have never been is there to be seen, but not too quickly, no sending postcards, slowly as if there's nowhere else, and where I've always been. There will be flowers binding their way among ancient gray stones, purples, yellows, reds, blossoming with a scent of promises, and snow between my barefoot toes, not cold from melting, pretending it's beach sand, wet and warm as a memory. And birds, there must be birds. I never see them, but they're there. Their songs, the many pieces of the orchestra tuning up and down. The salty water I taste while swimming, healing my many wounds, my knees scraped from barnacles, my countless sadnesses of loss. And hills to climb, beating my heart and descend, coasting without wheels, viewing more hills from the summit peaks and more hills from the basin bottoms. This place I have never been, I will find it and love you there. But the hour is running late. It's time we go. It's time we go.
Oh, that's
Thank
great.
you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Doug. There's a lot of emotion there. You can really feel it, that longing. Thanks for sharing that.
Thank you, Tim. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, it was Douglas Silver, This Place I Have Never Been. Next, let's go to a first-time rattler. Barb Christing is here.
Thanks, Tim.
Hi, Barb. Yeah, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, so this was an idea that came to me on a hike that I did months and months and months and months ago, wrote notes on my phone. This prompt pulled it out of me. So thank you for that.
Yeah, and let us know, too, where you're calling from, since you're the first time on.
North Carolina, Brevard, North Carolina, right in the mountains.
Great. Right by Terry Erickson, too, their first Poetry Pond poet earlier, I guess.
How fun.
Yeah.
So this is entitled Daddy's Shoulders.
Great poem for today, too, as well as the prompts.
Drowsy birds rest while the forest sleeps in the climbing heat. The crunch of my shoes and wheezing breath, white noise in the silence. My mind goes numb, folds into the silence. Alone on the trail, I stop, mid-stride, strain my ears to hear the sound that pricks my equilibrium. Giggles waft through the branches, joined by Daddy's voice, focused on little ears that ride upon his shoulders, ponytails bobbing in sync with his stride. I step aside to let them pass. They take all the oxygen with them, leave me gasping for the shoulders I never knew. In one heartbeat, I leave the tranquil sea of green to travel back to days before the wrinkles, when I was being formed, taught who I am, my value, the shape I hold within the world, learning that I was, that I am, invisible. I feel the child in me, ever hopeful that today would be the day that Daddy saw me, held my hand, took me to the pond to feed the ducks crusts of bread. But the bread grows stale in the hoping, now 6 decades old. Back beneath the canopy of leaves, the sweet laughter recedes, consumed by days I shall never know. I am left with a silence and a wheezing heart that aches to see the view from Daddy's shoulders.
Oh, what a moving poem. And, given the prompt and the context, sort of knowing where that was going, an interesting variation on it. But, yeah, beautiful poem, Daddy's Shoulders, really touching. Thanks for sharing that.
Thank you.
Yeah. That was a first-time caller, Barb Christing. Great to see that. Daddy's Shoulders. Hope you come again soon, Barb. And another first-time caller coming up next, Smitha Segal, I believe. I think we haven't had Smitha. We had you before, Smitha. Are you there?
Thank you, Tim. I may want to. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining. I think your first time, right?
Yes, it's my first time. My apologies. I'm here to listen to the poetry, Tim, today. I'm not here with a poem today.
Okay, well that's
So
no
I'd be
problem
very
at all. It's a
happy
good
listening to everybody.
yeah, it's a good reminder too. If you're watching on the YouTube, the original place it was streaming, or Facebook, then you can see the poems too. So it's a little better than watching on the Zoom. But yeah, glad to hear and glad to have new faces always. Next time, bring a poem. It'd be great. We'd love to hear it.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, that was Smitha Segal. And next, in that case, let's go to none other than everyone's favorite Dick Westheimer, who is not first in line. I don't know. Probably throwing everyone a bone, letting everybody in first.
I might be the only Dick Westheimer, not just everybody's favorite Dick Westheimer. But
well, you're also everyone's least favorite, so.
Yeah, there's that. Thanks for reminding me.
No,
the happy Father's Day to you too, Tim.
Yep. So what do you got for us? Yeah.
So I want to tell you, this brought out, I had a revelation this week. I was listening to a podcast about something called aphantasia, which is, I didn't either. And I didn't know it existed, but it is a group of people, not a lot, who cannot visualize.
Oh yeah, I do have seen that. There's that meme about like can you picture an apple and what do you see?
Right.
And some people
And
see
I
the
was
word
listening
apple.
to it and I
Yeah.
went, holy cow, this explains a lot.
It does.
It explains a lot about memory. People with aphantasia have difficulty going to sleep for reasons I don't necessarily need to. I have since childhood. You can't count sheep because you can't see sheep.
Oh, wow.
Memory is much different for people with aphantasia because you don't have visual references. And so when I encountered this prompt, it was like, and I wanted to take it literally, a place that we dreamt of going rather than do a metaphorical place. And I just couldn't call up any images of any place I want to go. And my wife reminded me, I never want to go anyplace. And once I'm there, I never want to leave, right? Because I can't visualize the next place. And it's like, you know, of course, I'm very happy to claim my own disability, right? I can join the ranks, but it's just sort of a wonderful revelation.
That's very wonderful for me too, Dick, because you're obviously a great poet, and I've always wondered if it was like a struggle for people, with that, because it's a good percentage of the population, from what I hear, to write poetry because it's such a visual thing. But you have great your poems are rich with concrete imagery all over the place, so somehow it works. That's kind of a relief that there's not like a segment of society that's like cut off from enjoying poetry.
Well, and as I was writing this poem, I tried not to make it sort of like a personal poem, and I don't know if I failed or not, but it was like trying to work through this whole notion of what is it? Where do I want to go? How do I know where I want to go? So I'll give it a shot. I don't have a lot of confidence in the poem, but I have a lot of confidence that I really enjoyed the discovery.
Oh, that's really fascinating. Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
So it's, where does a person with an aphantasia dream of going? My son asks me how I can run the same mile-long loops through the woods every day and not be bored, and I tell him it's different every time. The sun angles through the trees in changing ways. The undersides of leaves shudder to the breeze as a lover's kiss differs from the next and the next. Shadows dapple the path in new ways with each step, and I know the route, but not the way until I walk it. Sometimes the creek wafts gaseous smell of heron dung, sometimes the reek of rotting scum, sometimes it's the faint taste of the sea. Often I hear the water wash over the rocks like little bells. Then sometimes it sluices like a million mothers whispering, shh. There are portals in the heat of summer where a pocket of cool air comes up from the bottoms like a great refrigerator door that I stand before. How could anyone dream of this moment on this path with my foot suspended right before it falls, this definitive minute closer to my death? And who wouldn't want to visit this very point in time, this infinitesimal instant where there is no pain? The instant between two others I know I share with you, dear reader. Maybe you too saw that single dewdrop cling to the tip of the blade of grass, the lone bee foraging the one white clover that did not succumb to weed killer. I don't recall your name or face, but I know this about you. If you are reading this, you will hear this click, and I will take this one more breath, then this, then, and you will hear the word this.
Well, that is fascinating. Great music in that poem. I really enjoyed it. And then, so I gotta ask, I'm fascinated by this. So having such image-rich poems, and enjoying poems that are that rich in image, what is the experience like for the undersides of the leaves shudder to the breeze of his lover's kiss, and like that little drop? What is the experience of that, if not visual? Uh-oh, he froze.
I don't see it. That's all I know.
Oh, that's fascinating.
I don't see it.
Mm-hmm.
I do write a lot of notes when I'm out and around.
Mm-hmm.
So all those things I captured when I was out on that walk. And I do think about these things, but only when I'm sort of seeing them can I see them.
Oh, wow.
And so I think for poetry for me, and this has been sort of like like you talk about a magic potion. It has been, I remember writing a poem early on about like, I have no words for this experience. And I was thinking, Jesus, I'm a poet. Of course I have words for this. And it was a little transformational, like it's the words that make me feel it.
Wow.
And that I can't drop, and I think this is all part of the same thing, that I can draw up the feeling that you get when you see a red apple with the green, you like the thing you talk. I asked my wife this morning, I visualize an apple, what do you see? And it was a red apple with a mottled yellow with a little stem and a green. No, she said, I don't see the green leaf. And I'm going, holy cow, like you,
wow.
Like, I had no idea, and now it makes perfect sense.
Yeah, well, that's so fascinating. It's always so fascinating how different we all are and all our experiences, which is one of the things that makes poetry such a fascinating thing, is you get to enter inside someone else's experience too. Well, that's really cool. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity. It was wonderful.
Yeah.
Cool, meeting of the prompt and the podcast that made me go.
Wow. Well, that's great. Really cool to hear. And great poem too, Dick. I really love the music in that.
Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Yeah, it was Dick Westheimer with Where Does a Person with Aphantasia Dream of Going? Okay, next let's go to Chelsea McGlynn, who's got Chelsea 2.0 on here. Of course, there are two Chelsea with a mix, and so we get a little confused sometimes. But hey, Chelsea.
Hi, how are you?
I'm great. Good to see you.
So, similar to Jared, I also wrote about Yellowstone. Because I've never been and I've always wanted to go. And this poem actually inspired me, for once, to think far enough ahead of time to book Yellowstone hotels for next summer. So I will be there next year.
Well, great idea. Yeah, for sure. Let's hear it.
All right. It's a bit of a tongue twister for me, so I apologize if I stumble. Yellowstone. Elk bugle, bison bellow, geysers gasp and groan. Fractured faults rumble seeps out of fumaroles. Microbial maps of thermophiles grow out green and gold. Belching mud pots sink the hides of steaming buffalo. Bear cubs learn from mother bear how to grub and gobble. Whortleberries rake from their stems first by the mouthful. Rhyolite chunks of old cold crust grind to granite and gravel. Tell me, please, what faults of mine could also see this bountiful.
Oh, very cool. Yeah, I love the rhythms in that, and that faults of mine is a really neat way to take it home. You know, it's one of those places I wish I'd gone to. I drove like around the perimeter of Yellowstone as I was driving from New York to California to take this job 20 years ago, and I didn't go in. It was like, I don't really have time to go in. I got there's cool stops all over, and it's too big, and I'll be back sometime and never have, so...
Never have. Well, now maybe next year.
Yeah, maybe next year. Yeah, well, Katie's still here. Maybe we'll talk about that. All right.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for sharing that, Chelsea. Looking forward to seeing you go there next year.
Yeah.
There's Chelsea McGlynn with a Yellowstone. And let's go to the other Chelsea next. Although there is no other Chelsea. They're all the best Chelsea, each one of them. Hey, Chelsea McClellan, how are you doing tonight?
Couldn't agree more. I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm great. Yeah, good to see you. So what do you have to share? Where do you want to go?
Well, I am a bit of a homebody. There's not a lot of places I want to go, but I do really want to see the redwoods before I die.
Oh yeah, well they're great. That's something that I have done too, going down the coast and with the kids, both the sequoias and the other ones, and they are pretty magical. I got to agree. When driving the car through the trunk of an actual living tree is crazy too.
Absolutely. Yeah. So this poem is to my children and, Lord willing, future grandchildren.
Okay.
And it's called When I Finally Get to the Redwoods, and you look up at the ancient trees with their impossible growth. Then notice me, face first in soil, singing the praises of its complex notes of compost, sweet times, griefs, and arguments. When these shovel-hardened fingers finally part its mycorrhizal sea in search of the twists where tree meets root and two roots meet. When you stretch your fingertips to mine around roots wider than you thought a trunk could grow, sing with me of time, of sap, how its sweetness can't be bought, but freely flows to give the growth, how I, today, am so weak, not yet that tree you sought.
Oh, that's beautiful. Another, it's like a sonnet night here. We didn't even ask for it, but I love it. When I finally get to the redwoods. Thanks for sharing that, Chelsea. I loved it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good night.
Yeah, good night. Great poems tonight. It was Chelsea McClellan with When I Finally Get to the Redwoods. And next, let's go to Mark Grenier.
Hi, Tim.
Hey,
I
Mark.
chickened out. I didn't do the poem that the prompt today. So I went to we did an ekphrastic prompt a while back, I think. And
Oh, yeah, your favorite
absolutely.
painting. Wasn't that your favorite? Yeah.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. Anyway, it's called Untitled 1953 after Rothko.
Yeah, and thanks for including
And
the
it's
picture.
very short.
Yeah, short poem for a very simple Rothko painting, Untitled
Yeah.
1953. Yeah, you can see on the screen that pink, black, and red Rothko, or
Yeah.
orange. Yeah.
Yeah, purple. I don't know what color it is. I don't know. Anyway, not sky, not earth, not heaven nor hell, not quite paint on a canvas frame. The city lights, perhaps, that overlie some empty black, some low-down flame.
Oh, I love that. That's a great ekphrastic poem for that painting. Yeah, really cool. Yeah,
Thank
I
you.
didn't really see the city lights, but then as soon as you say it, bam, you can see that too. That's really neat. Some low down flame, good sounds too. Thanks for sharing that, Mark.
Thank you.
That's Mark Grenier with Untitled 1953. And that's a reminder too, I didn't say, but I always should, that if you have an older prompt that you didn't get in time but want to share it, feel free to. Any prompts we've had over the years, or you can feel free to share. Mike Bales is here next. Hey, Mike.
Oh, yeah. How's the Grand Canyon?
Oh, it was wonderful. Yeah, we really loved it. You know, the great pictures. What I loved the most about it was that there were no like signs like warning, stay back, and like don't climb down. You could just like climb out. They just trust you to go anywhere, which is really cool. Like it's not like the California parks here where everything is like an insurance risk. They're just letting you do and assess your own risk, and there was a nice part of the experience.
Yeah, and I love too. I have to say, the people at the top, there were so many cool connections from people from like distant countries. Like we witnessed really cute conversations with like everybody wanting to connect and having this experience. And I swear I could have just walked around. I eavesdropped so hard that day.
Those Italian Harley bikers who were
Oh
talking
my God,
to the
I
German.
love them. I love them. They were amazing. And we thought they were a father-son. I took pictures of them so I remember them too. But they had a selfie stick, which still exists apparently also. So yeah, the people being so joyous and taking in like the wonder, it's like how I like to imagine people feel when they read a really great poem. So I love the people.
And the music of so many languages too, you know?
Yeah, it was really amazing.
It really was cool.
Yeah. And then the random squirrels.
Yeah,
were
the
very
squirrels
well
who have no fear of human beings and just beg.
Which is my daughter's favorite part of the whole trip was squirrels.
Yeah, those squirrels have some issues.
They do.
They're not going to survive on their own post-apocalypse, that's for sure.
No, that's for sure. Okay.
All right, well, anyway.
The big news today is I qualified for the finals for a karaoke contest.
Oh, excellent. What's your song?
one-
Do you got to go to?
I just picture someone, I Will by the Beatles, great
nice.
ballad. Then Wonderful Tonight by Eric Clapton. I sang them the last 3 different rounds things that I've gone to. So
well, good job.
It'll be
and good luck
sometime
in
in
the
August,
finals.
what I heard.
Yeah.
These friends, well, I'm a victim of reading A Movable Feast by Ernest Hemingway. I'm going there. These friends and I would be like out in downtown Davenport, outside a coffee shop that is no more. It was a really neat spot. And I'd go, this is our left bank. There used to be poetry readings in the Midwest Writing Center, was in downtown Davenport. Then we'd have our readings and go to a bar and grill or one of those microbrew places with food across the alley from where the Midwest Writing Center was, and I tell the waitress, "This is our left bank." So I kind of pictured going to Paris and Hemingway and the Expatriates. Wrote this on Submittable.
Yeah, I got it up. Yeah, go ahead whenever
The
you're ready.
poem, When I Go to Paris. I'll take my friends and we'll travel light with aspirations and hope. We'll sit outside a cafe on the left bank in shadows of Hemingway, Stein, and Fitzgerald while a waitress approaches. We'll speak just enough French to order a few items, but we'll keep our thoughts close until she steps back inside. We'll cradle our notebooks in hand and we'll write as the melody of an accordion fills the air. Others will laugh as a pantomime performs at their table. All the while, we'll wonder if we could change the world with a poem, with a word or a poem. One of my friends who's drinking a little too much wine will stand up and shout, "Bastille Day" and "Revolution." We'll nod and he'll return to his notebook. The saying at our side will flow as it has throughout time. We'll look up as a jetliner cuts through wispy clouds and squint as we look at the sun. We'll share verses and lines and laugh among ourselves. The poems we write will possess a language their own.
Oh, very cool. Yeah, I love the ending too. Again, great endings today. And that is Mike Bales with When I Go to Paris. What a great place that would be. You know, great imagination there, Mike.
Oh, yeah. Okay,
yeah,
thanks.
The ideal for all writers. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Yeah, When I Go to Paris by Mike Bales. Next, let's go to Jeremy McKay. Hey, Jeremy.
Hey, hi.
Yeah, great to see you. Thanks for joining.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks. Thanks for having me.
You've been on before, right? It's not your first
I
time.
was on right before you guys took vacation.
Yeah, great. Yeah, good to see you again. I thought so. Yeah. So what do you have for us? Where did you want to go?
Fantastic pyramids. So I wrote something for going to Egypt. Did you get that?
Yeah, I do, and that's one of the ones I thought about too. I'd love to go to Egypt, except it seems like I was talking about.
I don't think now is a good time to go.
Exactly. Yeah, and I was talking about it on a hike this morning with my son, and I was trying to think of like what brainstorming the best places to pick. And he said Egypt, but then he was like, "But wait, isn't it really hot there?" It's like,
it is really.
It's pretty hot.
I would imagine it really is. Yeah, I don't know.
Uh-huh.
I was on a ship on the water there once, but never touched the land.
Oh, really cool. Okay, well, let's hear this poem.
Thanks. So we find it now. Fantastic pyramids. Imagine winds whistle sand into dust. The Explorer theme song plays in my head. Da 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 dum, da da da. I'm wearing my Indiana Jones hat. Eternal mascara eyes. Huge pyramids built by slaves. The lion's head of a man guarding who knows what. There stands the camel with saddle and blanket. Sand rises slow, blurs my view, a hard fog. I breathe in. Heat fills my nostrils. Hints of sandalwood, the taste of dryness. I swallow to clear my throat and tolerate it all. I am in the land of the pharaohs. Words are said. I'm not quite hearing them as I exit the crowded tour bus. The ancient pyramids stand before me. I want to get a closer feel. Increase the connection, the search for meaning and the search for gods. I barely notice the crowd when we are herded back onto the bus.
Yeah, I love that. Great pyramid poem. And for those just listening, Jeremy put on his Indiana Jones hat mid-poem, which is just wonderful too. Excellent use of props tonight, as well as performances. So thanks for sharing that, Jeremy.
Thanks. Thank you.
Yeah, there's Jeremy McKay with Fantastic Pyramids. And the other place that I was thinking about doing was Göbekli Tepe. So I'd be very surprised if Audrey Friedman wanted to go to Göbekli Tepe too, but let's see. Hey, Audrey, where did you dream of going?
Papiti, Tahiti.
Ah, that's not bad either.
Okay. There is music in a name. Papiti, Tahiti. Does it sing with ukulele strings buzzing through a tropical breeze, or rustle with dried grass woven into hula skirts? Maybe the shush of water gushing over a volcanic rock ledge. Lakes of black hair cascade on tan shoulders of flotillas of tour guides as one educates me about the society on the Society Islands.
Oh, very cool. Love the music in that. That Haiti to Haiti, very cool. Thanks so much for sharing that, and a great choice. Another place I would love to go.
Aha, thank you. I hope we get there.
Yeah, let's do it, Audrey. Let's make it a road
Okay.
trip.
We'll double date.
Yeah,
Yep.
excellent. Thanks, Audrey. That was Audrey Friedman's There Is Music in Name. Yeah, very fun. And let's see, who else is on the call? Carolyn Codd is here. Hi, Carolyn. Are you there? Let's see. Gotta unmute. Are you there, Carolyn? Oh, there you are. Hello.
That worked. Yeah, I was clicking on unmute in another place, but that didn't work. So,
well, we got you
anyways,
now. Yeah, good to see you again. As
I've
always.
always thought I'd like. Yeah, I've always thought I'd like to go to the Arctic, but that would be a hard thing to do. But so this is like a dream, and it's like my real dreams. I have adventuresome, very visual dreams, but this is more of a daydream. But anyhow,
very cool. Well, let's
it's
hear
called Bear Hugs. The Arctic Bear Hug. The Arctic, a place I've often thought I'd like to visit, but it would be a hard trip and I'd be ill-equipped. I would talk with the native people about how they cope living in such a harsh climate now changing, and about their relationship with other living beings they find there, especially with the polar bear. Thinking on this, suddenly I felt very cold. Looking around, I saw nothing but ice and snow surrounding me. I was there in the Arctic. I was dressed adequately, but I was shivering. Taking a few steps, I could hear the crunch of snow and ice. As I moved forward, a few natives approached me. They told me about how they and the other living beings depend on each other, but that they, and especially the polar bears, were now having hard times due to the melting of snow, of ice. They showed me how they preserve fish, which I could smell as they smoked and dried it. They gave me some salmon, my favorite fish, to sample. It tasted great. Then I heard more crunching of ice and snow. The people disappeared as a polar bear approached. Not a cub, nor full grown, perhaps an adolescent female. As she came close, I felt frozen, not so much by cold and fear, but by awe. She was right in front of me. I couldn't move. She stood up, reached out her front paws, touched me, and gave me a big hug. No longer shivering, I almost melted. She got down, and as she seemed to fade away, I wished her and her people long lives. Suddenly, it was no longer there. I was in my own bed, waking up with a warm, fuzzy feeling, thanks to the hug of a polar bear.
Aw, thanks for sharing that. What a fun daydream. Bear hug. Thanks for taking us on that journey.
Yeah.
That was Carolyn Codd with Bear Hug. And that's going to do it for the Zoom, I believe. One double check last. And let's see what Ted Guevara has for us. He's always got an image and a poem. This looks like I can see what the poem is going to be. And it is an image of Mount Everest. I think. It's a tall mountain. Anyway. A tall point. Maybe it's not Mount Everest. It's a little more... Well, we'll find out. We'll read the poem. Because it's there is the poem. There has to have a restroom with a hot air blower and a soap dispenser with scented soap. Climb sounds too committed or exhausting for sure. So theirs should be a tiki bar every 80 feet with comfortable stools and a bartender with a reputation for making the best sangria. This side of Chamolungma, there should be a Zen bench where people sit and ask themselves, what the freak am I doing here? Which is conflicting with there. There is Paris or Costa Rica, where your toes don't turn magenta and fall off. So, and it was Mount Everest that he was talking about. So thanks so much for sharing that, Ted. A very fun poem, as always. And let's see. Well, Zachary Honeycutt somewhere. I didn't see him today. I think we'll save it in case he comes back next week to read. So we'll have that in the coffer. And that's going to wrap up the open lines for tonight. Let's go back to our prompt poems. Oh wait, we're gonna do the haiku first. But hey, Katie, we'll bring it back. How you doing?
Hello. Cut to the haiku.
Cut to the haiku. So the haiku for this week was based on this article, which was actually based on. So this is usually I do the Sciku by like looking through some science articles and stuff, or I see something during the week. This I heard at the sky. What do they call it? The Sky Night. You know, where we laid down on that trampoline. What was that called?
I keep calling it the Star Tour, but I think that's a ride at Disney
It's like
World.
Disneyland, yeah. So whatever it is, we were on the Star Tours, and R2-D2 was giving us.
We were laying down on a giant outdoor trampoline with a group looking at the stars.
Yeah, and
while the woman giddily talked about them.
Exactly, yeah. And she was very much a hippie with a lot of hippie thoughts, which were very fun. So,
yeah.
But anyway, one thing she said, if you remember, was that there is going to be an extra star in the sky this summer. And
it happens every 70 years,
80,
right?
Close, yeah, close, very close. So the star is T. Coronae Borealis. This is courtesy of Earth.com. So I heard that, I looked it up, the actual truth about it, and it is true. So this star, and I'll show you a picture of it on the screen right here. This star, it's actually a binary star system. And the star itself, T. Corona Borealis, which is an interesting name too, is sucking in hydrogen from its neighbor star, from its little binary twin there. And every 80 years or so, it accrues enough, like clockwork, of hydrogen to trigger a nova. It explodes. And you can't see the star with the naked eye, but once every 80 years, it appears in the Northern Cross as an extra star. So that is the story for the week. And the Sciku is this, which is also inspired by events of this morning. Here we go. An ant on the tablecloth, the size of a star. And I read it wrong. Ant on a tablecloth, the size of a star. There you go. Got the pronouns a little wrong there. But anyway, those words matter. So that is the Sciku for this week. And that is the show for this week. A really fun one. And now, Katie Dozier, what do you have for us next week is the prompt?
I don't have it up as we're in different things. I believe I know basically what I could pull it up in the message that I texted you.
Well, I will say it for you in that case.
Okay.
The prompt for this week is to write an extended metaphor poem that features a celestial body. So we got the star going in there. Now it's write an extended metaphor poem that features a celestial body. And it sort of begs the question too, why this prompt and not a meter prompt? Everybody was assuming you would go like write a dactyl poem or something. Why did you not go there? Why'd you go in this direction?
Exactly, Timothy Green. I have to leave the people guessing. And did I have a little bit of like maniacal laughter to myself when people were guessing during the show that it was going to be meter? Yes, I did. If you want to write meter, that's great. I feel very metrically inspired after that episode, and so that's always great. We had a lot of formal prompts last month, so I'm trying to balance it out. And I'm feeling like, the solstice is this week. I'm feeling very celestial after reading Annie Finch's poems leading up to this Rattlecast, so I think this will be a fun direction. And I'm a sucker for an extended metaphor poem, and I think that kind of setting, it's ripe for that kind of extended metaphor, or at least we'll find out together if it is indeed right for that.
You are always very celestial, Katie Dozier.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks for picking that prompt. Looking forward to what everybody comes up with. So that is your prompt for this week. I'll say it once again. Write an extended metaphor poem that features a celestial body. And just if you don't know, an extended metaphor is a metaphor that like the whole poem is a metaphor. So it's like, we can come up with examples and talk about it at some point, but
we can. We also have an episode of the Poetry Space completely about metaphor where we go into extended metaphor a lot, or the Neil Postman Award for Metaphor show where we talked about extended metaphor versus, metaphors within a poem.
Yeah, that's true, because some of those winners are extended metaphors and some are just have a lot of cool metaphors, and it's always interesting to pick. You have said, I believe, that you think extended metaphor is your favorite poem type.
It is. I think it might be, guys. So no high expectations this week or anything. We have the most sunlight of the year to work with, people. We got to get those poems in.
Well, thanks for that, and enjoy your Alanis Morissette.
I'm going to try to rush over there.
Over?
I am going to go over. She's playing like 5 minutes away, and I haven't listened to any of the music she's made in the last 15 or so years, so it better be that I can hear You Ought to Know or something from Jagged Little Pill.
And there's a cool little park right next to the amphitheater, so you can just for free sit and listen and enjoy. And
it's called Green Park.
It's my park. All right. Well, thanks so much, Katie. Always a pleasure.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And
Bye.
ride safe if you ride your bike. It's dark.
I am going to ride my bike. Okay. Thank you.
Be safe.
Okay. Okay, well. Bye.
All right. So that is the show for this week. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. Next week's guest on the Rattlecast is going to be Christine Potter. You might recognize her from such great films as The Poetry Space, where she appeared a couple months ago. She's also been on Post Respond not too long ago, just last month, and a couple other times. So she's been on the Rattlecast, but never a full show. And she has a really interesting life. She's a really cool person. She, a singer. She's in our our musicians issue coming up as a choir singer. She's also does a kind of broadcast thing too with like ham radio. Again, I'm curious about that. I'm going to learn more, but she's a really fascinating person. Her newest book is Unforgetting. So she's going to be the guest on Rattlecast number 249, or is that right? Should it be 250? Let me see. Yeah, it's actually 250.
250.
It's a typo. I got to fix that. So it's episode 250, a big number. Guest is going to be Christine Potter, Sunday, June 23rd, regular time, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific, along with your extended metaphor poems featuring a celestial body. Hope you have a great week, and we will talk to you later. Good night.